Well, I see that countdown and then there's no getting out of it after that. I better just close that off. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode. What is it? Episode 16 of Robbo's Tech Talk Tuesday. I see a few are on already. This one I'm actually pretty excited about because it's something that I know very little about, in all honesty. And one of the reasons that I've sort of started this sort of live cross and whatever, because one thing with YouTube and all the social media now, you can find people that have really had a bit of experience with it and whatever, and they're glad, they'll gladly share that knowledge. And for those that haven't or don't know who Nathan Stuart is, you're about to find out because he's a top bloke. He runs a YouTube channel with all things hunting. All right, he's changed the name to make it easier for me to remember. It's called Edge of the Outback. So if you haven't looked into it, look into it. I'm sure I'll put a link on there, but if I haven't, I will later, but I'm sure I have. So, Nathan, are you there? I think he's there.
G'day, Robbo.
How are you, mate? There you go. There's a few people on here. They're going to strangle you tonight, mate. They're going to get every little bit of information out of you.
Right,
But
thanks for having me on.
oh no, mate, it's a pleasure. Look, we've sort of communicated quite a bit about the topic, and as you know, look, I've pretty much spotlighted most of my life, whether it be rabbits, foxes, or whatever, and I've sort of held off so much for this thermal and night vision and whatever, and you haven't helped because you've sort of said, come on, you need to get this, you need to get that. And I look at so much of your footage, and as I look at all other channels and whatever, but I think you've got your head around it really well. And you're an engineer, is that correct? You got an engineer.
So
Yeah,
that doesn't help. I get a bit OCD on certain topics. Yeah.
I was about to say, you self-confessed you get OCD, so that's not a bad thing when it comes to this, because I know that most of the questions that I reckon they're going to be asked, I reckon you're going to be able to nail them. But it is great to have you on, mate, and you've been lucky enough to have some local access of late and just keep the freezer full, so good luck to you. And thank God New South Wales have got some half decent rules and regulations at the moment. So
Well, fingers crossed you guys get some flex soon as well.
yeah, well, things have changed a little bit down here in Vic, as in, well, we think they've changed. The rules might have always been there. Pretty much our understanding now for pest control, you can virtually help out farmers, but yeah, you still got to abide by all the sort of the other rules and whatever. But yeah, it could change at any moment. But I'm just going to quickly go through here and have a look at some of the questions, if there's any questions. Otherwise, we might be talking to ourselves for a long time. But I see a few of the regulars on here. A lot of blokes you'll know, mate. Robin Coker, Cole Curtis, Richard Hadfield, Dan Stevens, Jake Hart, Jamie Bogut, Fox and One, Steve. G'day, now hold on, we've got a Baldy McNuts. You've got to enjoy some of these names, mate. Baldy McNuts. Hey, Robbo, have watched all your vids. First time I've made it to the live broadcast. Well, Baldy McNuts, I hope you got a good question for Nathan, because I'm sure he's up to it. Look out. It's not my brother, but it's the same name, Michael Robinson. Wayne Spiteri is another regular. G'day, Steve. Got the beers ready, and I'm ready for another 2-hour session. I don't know. Nathan would say is battling the elements out there. He's testing every insect spray he can find. Look out. My partner in crime's on as well. Lethal. He's in a situation. He's going to take the dog. Going to take April for a run tomorrow. Vic Wide Pest Control's on. There's a few on. So if you can hear me, guys, come on, fire up some questions. What do you want to know about thermals and night vision? I'm going to ask a few in a minute anyway, but what do we got? A few others. Marty Skelly. All right, Game Trail Films. Steve's on. All right. Now, I'm going to come in at it from, like I said, basically spotlighting, probably, I don't know, for the best part of 40 plus years. We've tried every spotlight over the years, from going from carrying half a car battery in a backpack to these old, just about candle-powered lights to the LED torches now. And I've started to think these thermals for a situation for me, and me personally, where would it come in handy? Now I know you've got your thermal monoculars, and then you've got your thermal scopes. You've got your night vision scopes, which can be also, I think some of the reticles can be turned off, and is that correct on a lot of them?
Yep.
Yeah. So for me personally, I'm now looking into it, say, when we're at night, we often be in a situation that we might be calling wild dogs. Our current situation is basically howl or whatever, and then listen for the grass or whatever, because we don't want to shine the light around, because as soon as we do, we give ourselves away. But this is where your thermal monocular, as I see it, is really going to come into it. Now, you've had a couple. Can you just give us a bit of a rundown on sort of what you've used and what you've sort of found?
Yeah, the first one I got was a Pulsar Axion Key 30. I guess that was a gateway into thermal, something that I'd been interested in for quite a while. I did a review on my latest thermal the other week, and I said in that I've always enjoyed watching the American footage of the big pig bomb ups that they get in Texas and stuff like that. So I've always known about it. It's always been something out of reach though, price wise. I guess the Axion series from Pulsar came out, and that was something that was a bit more affordable.
And the Pulsar at the moment is pretty much, would you say, sort of the number one brand in Australia? It's probably got the biggest backup at the moment.
They've got the biggest name. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say that they're the latest technology, because obviously a lot of what I'm seeing is sort of, they look very similar from one, and obviously a lot of it's badged basically. Would that be fair to say?
I think there's only so many factories that make thermals. I think there's only sort of 3 or 4 globally. So I think as we see more come out, they can only come from so many sources.
And you've gone from the Pulsar, which was that model didn't have Wi-Fi, did it? The one you had.
So I mainly wanted to get a model that had Wi-Fi. Probably the driver for that was YouTube. So I sold the Axion and I bought a XI.
Yeah. Did it have internal? Did it have internal recording on that one?
No.
So
what
the
model? XI does, but the Axion didn't.
So that model, the Axion, what model was that? Because that's still a current model, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the Key 30. So the next model up had Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But I didn't see a need for it, and at the time there's a bit of a correlation between the next model's got a higher base magnification, which helps if you're trying to get identification at longer range, but it also limits the field of view. So the field of view on thermals is quite narrow anyway.
So what was the base magnification on that one?
It was 2.5.
Okay. And did you find that was probably ideal, or you find that probably... Yeah, okay. So about 2.5 is... Would you go any higher on the base, and would you have sort of a point that you'd say, no, that's too high for a base magnification?
On a scanner, no.
No. So like 2.5... Yeah.
Okay. I like that. I'd probably go lower if I was using it, say, vehicle-based on a T-handle.
Yeah.
I'd probably go the next model down.
Yeah.
Which is about 1.8.
And just mentioning that, like if you're on a quad or in a vehicle where you used to put the spotlight on a handle through the roof, now you can, if you've got a Wi-Fi model, now correct me if I'm wrong here, you can basically screw the unit, because most of them have like a tripod thread on the bottom, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so you could screw that on your T-handle and whatever, and then Wi-Fi and have it a laptop or whatever on your dash or on your vehicle, and basically everywhere you're rotating, you're going to see what's there. So there's a lot of people I know that have been doing that. So if you're looking for one, personally, I think I'd minimum want to have one with Wi-Fi, and then it really comes down to resolution after that. And this is pretty much why one of the reasons you moved up to the next model, which is...
Yeah, so I went from a 320 core thermal to a 384 core. And the image is a lot better, I find. And then the next step up into that is 640 core. So I think that's about as high as you can go with a consumer grade thermal. But the biggest thing with thermal is they do have digital zoom on the device, but it zooms into those available pixels. So every time you zoom in, 1, 2, or 3 times mag, the image is half as good at each step. So it does degrade the image when you zoom.
It gets
So
pixelated or boxy. That's pretty much what you said to
really
me.
quickly.
Yeah.
Really quickly. So that's the benefit. If it's obviously a lot more expensive to get a 640 core thermal, but you get the ability to zoom in a bit more.
Yeah.
And not lose as much image.
And another thing I remember you saying to me is that the image that you actually see in your viewfinder is usually better quality than what's recorded. Is that pretty
Heaps
standard
better.
to say? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's heaps better. So I think the recordings are only about 420p,
Okay.
whereas the eyepiece on mine's, I think it's 1280.
Yeah.
So it's heaps better. The eyepiece has got a heap more detail than what you see on the screen.
And it's like we've talked about current models and newer models, and are most of them in that scenario, or like any of them that are out there at the moment that you know of that say if they're a 1080p, what's in the viewfinder, I don't know if they are. Is there any that sort of correlate the same sort of thing? What's recorded is what you see? Or is that only in the top end?
Yeah, probably some of the top end stuff. I'm not up to
Yeah.
speed. There's some new pulsar gear that's coming out, the Trail 2, I think it is. They're not out for a bit yet, but I'm not sure what they output the recordings at. It's probably something that you'd have to dig into with the manufacturer, because it's not something like I didn't understand what the recording quality was like before I brought a thermal. It's not something that's published.
Yeah. And I'll go through a few of the questions in a minute because there's a few popping up now. But just another thing that we sort of keep, well, you more so than me, but I've sort of now realising that it was only a matter of time before the big players started to step into the game, because they realised it's now becoming quite a big thing. Look, me personally, and I know yourself, what our uses would be is purely for vermin. For everything else, I'm not too interested in it, but I could just see the benefits for calling foxes of a night. It just sort of gives you the idea. Even for myself, even if I didn't swap over to a night vision scope, I could sort of have a thermal viewer, basically whistle a bit, have a look, identify my target, have the torch on top of the spotlight, on top of the scope, and basically be ready. I know the direction it's coming from, which is be enough for myself. But now I believe Leica are going to be releasing one. I believe Beretta will be bringing a Steiner in, and Zeiss have also got one coming in probably. I think they would have been released if it wasn't for all the turmoil in the world at the moment, but I'm pretty sure by the end of the year at the latest we'll probably see some of the big names starting to pop up. How good they are, whether they're just rebadged other brands, I don't know, but I think they're gonna have to get in the game, so it'd be interesting to see what they sort of pop up.
It's a good space to keep an eye on at the moment. I think there's some improved stuff coming out from everyone, it seems, at the moment. So I think you're right. I think the COVID stuff's probably held up some of the advances that we might have already seen. But
yeah, well, I think too we were gonna. There was so many shows, not only in Australia but overseas, that they were going to release a lot of these products that just had to be canned, sort of thing. So it's sort of put a lot of things on the back burner, I think. But now just bear with me now, mate. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the questions here. Righto, Cohen McKenzie, straight up, what is the best value for money thermal setup? You're on, buddy.
I'm on. Look, I'm probably biased because it's what I've got, but I'm pretty impressed with that XI. I sort of looked at what was available at the time with a couple of the other manufacturers, and look, I'm really happy with what I've got now. As a scanner, it's really good. Scopes, I think there's some new stuff that's going to come out that's probably worth keeping an eye on. The pulsar range seems pretty good on the scopes side of it, if you want a thermal scope. But probably the biggest advice I've got, if you want to get into thermal, get a hand scanner before you get a scope, because you can do so much more with it.
Yeah.
It's
And
heaps better. It's fine to think theoretically I'll buy a scope and I can scan with that, but the practicality of scanning with a rifle-mounted thermal is probably far from ideal.
No, and not only that, if you have a thermal monocular and a thermal scope, it's quite a big outlay to get to try to match them as well. But we'll go into your night vision in a minute. There's a couple of other questions here. And we'll probably both answer this. I'll answer this one first because I've sort of spoken a little bit about it to the GMA and whatever. And this one's from Ange Hunter. Can you use thermals on public land for hunting? And at the moment, I think there's a lot of laws that are trying to catch up with this thermal sort of thing. So what they've basically done, and I'll be corrected here, I'm sure, but my understanding is they come under spotlight laws. So anywhere that you cannot spotlight, you cannot have a thermal. So just bear that in mind. That's how I understand it. Is that pretty much how you see it, Nathan?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, even if you're travelling through an area that could be sort of classed as a deer hunting area in public land, I'd probably chuck, if you've got one, I'd probably put it in with your ammo and lock it up. Just so, if you do get pulled over for an inspection or whatever, if it's sitting on your seat beside you or something like that, yeah, you might be in a bit of strife. I could be wrong here, but I think it's better to be on the safe side. But that's how I see it at this stage. All right, let's just see. Fox and Steve, what's the best value for money entry-level thermal scope, fellas, and how much is the entry level? Well, have you pretty much said that, isn't it? I don't know how much they are, the entry level.
Look, you probably entry level to get into it. You probably $4,000 and up in a scope. That's sort of where they start.
And that's on the thermal scopes on the.
That's on the thermal. Yeah,
the pulsars.
And that's entry level. That's entry level, and then it goes up from there. You can probably spend, $9 or $10,000 on one if you wanted to.
Yeah. Well,
it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
The next question's actually on the PARD, so we might as well, before we answer this, we'll talk about basically. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically the situation I see that you're using and the gear you're using at the moment is your thermal for basically your monocular for spotting, and then you've got a couple of the PARD units, one that clips on the back of an existing scope and one that is a standalone unit. Now, it's the 008, it's a standalone unit, is that right?
Yep.
And the 007, and I know you've done some reviews on the comparison and whatever for both. But look, you've obviously tested these out quite a bit, and it seems to be working well for you. Look, where would you say the advantage of one over the other, say with the night vision compared to say the thermals?
At the moment, I like the added identification that I get from night vision. It's basically an invisible torch, so it's the same. It's nearly the same ID that you'd get with a spotlight. It's as good as that exterior light source that you shine through on the night vision scopes. So sometimes the thermal, just with that low resolution, you might not get a great idea. I mean, this is at longer ranges, 200 plus. You probably don't get great ID at that distance with the thermal.
Yeah,
but where it's night vision, it's the image is just a black and white image that you'd see with a spotlight or a torch. So.
And obviously the night vision,
see exactly what it is.
Yeah, and the night vision relies on an illuminator, basically an invisible torch, correct?
Yep.
So
correct.
The PARDs, I know the original NV008 in the PARD was a standalone unit, basically minus a rangefinder. Now it's an option, you can actually get one with a rangefinder on the side. The NV007 attaches, slips over, has an adapter and slips over an existing scope. And one thing I remember you saying to me, which was quite interesting, is the NV007 that clips over the scope, you're actually sometimes better off with a cheaper brand scope. Can you just explain a little bit of why that is, mate?
So the cause of that is a lot of the quality scopes have got an anti-IR coating. on the lens coatings.
So what did you notice, sort of thing, like when you put on the better scopes?
The image is just darker. They certainly still work, but I first got the 008 and I had I think it was a Japanese-made Vixen scope, and it had really nice glass on it. And I put the 007 on that, and it was just dark. I mean, you obviously compare everything to what you've seen on the internet, and I mean, the performance worked, but it wasn't as good as what I had expected. So I ended up sort of scrapping the Vixen route, and I brought a Optical, which are a known brand that works well with night vision, and the image is heaps better, better. And the same with some of the cheaper Bushnells work well. What you've got to remember is that because it's an add-on that goes on the back of the scope, you're trying to see that infrared light through all the lens elements in your scope as well as the night vision add-on. So it's just those good scopes just seem to have the anti-IR coatings that kill it a bit.
And if you were going to use that sort of setup, you also basically, is it a must-have to have a parallax adjustment on the scope?
Yep.
Yeah.
You can get away with it if it's a low-powered scope. I've seen people I've seen pictures on Facebook of Europeans that have put them on like a 1.5 to 5 power scope, like a straight tube low power thing. But anything over that,
and ideal power.
What's that, mate?
Ideal power. What sort of powered scope would you sort of recommend for that device?
Look, I run mine on a 2.5 to 10. The main reason being that the 007 magnifies the image that you see through the scope, so it's almost a factor of 2, I think. You put the part on the back, and all of a sudden my 2.5 base mag scope is 5 times magnification. So it certainly has an impact on your field of view. If you put it on, say, a 6 to 24, your base magnification straight away is 12.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
And that can be restricted.
Yeah, and what about, like, obviously when you add it onto the back, you're basically trying to make it a dual purpose. So, like, during the day, if you want to use a scope like normal, you can, but then you get to clip this on. How do you find setting the eye relief to do both? Is that an issue?
Yeah, it can be. Look, because my rifle's set up dedicated for that, I move the scope forward in the rings a little bit. I think some people I've seen just put the slip-on recoil pads that go over the back of the buttstock.
Oh, okay.
I've seen people just slide those on. So if they put a night vision add-on, they'll put that on so the length of pull's a bit longer, and their head fits the gun a bit better. But it does reduce it makes your eye relief longer. You've sort of got your head back a bit further.
Because they're basically, your face is right up against them compared to a normal scope where you've got your 3 or 4 inch eye relief. So
yeah, I think they're only 45 mil eye relief or something like that. They're quite short.
Now, moving on to the NV008, which is a standalone unit. Oh, now, the last question actually on the 007, is that run a 18650 battery as well?
Yep.
Okay, so that's a big plus straight up for the PARD for me. Running a sort of a battery that you can have a spare one in your pocket and whack it in, and a battery that's pretty readily available and can be charged externally. Can they be charged with the battery in the units?
I don't think they recommend to charge them like that, no. Okay, I don't think they've got the protection, no.
Okay, and both the 007 and the 008 have got inbuilt recording?
Yep.
What
micro SD?
Is it high definition, 1080p?
Yeah.
Now, I know the NV008, the standalone unit, can be basically used night and day. Can the 007, like, I know you'd probably take it off in the daytime, but can it be turned on in the same mode, like a daytime mode as well?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So moving to the PARD 008 standalone unit, you've got 2 options now, rangefinder or non-rangefinder version. Just run us through like the sort of basic specs, like their magnification, and what have you found as sort of the advantages of one over the other, sort of between the 007 and 008?
So the base mag on the MV008 is 5.5, and then there's digital magnification. I think it jumps to, I think it's 13, or they might be 6.5. It jumps to 13 at 2 times, and then obviously 26 as the highest magnification. It does get a bit pixelated, so probably a good example if you're at the range with the 008. I've got mine on a 17 HMR, and it's a struggle to see the holes at 100 yards in the paper. Just because you're looking at a 1080p digital image. They're basically, the 007's the same. They're basically an infrared digital camera that has a set of crosshairs in it.
Yeah,
so, you're comparing a camera image, I suppose, on that eyepiece. So the image isn't as good at the daytime, but the benefit you pick up with the 008 is the image is a bit better at night, because you're not trying to get the image through all those lens elements off your regular
well, that makes sense. Less losses, obviously. They can control what's happening with the unit. Now, both units can be sort of one shot zero. In other words, you get it on target, fire a shot, move. It virtually takes a digital image and then you move it and adjust it. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the 007's just your regular zero, but the two 008s, they're just, you just fire a shot, so you're holding the target, and basically the minute you go into the settings to change the X or Y axis of the reticle, the image freezes, and you just literally move the crosshair to where the hole went in the target.
Yeah, and, it looks pretty good.
It's not always one shot, but it's it doesn't take much to get them zero.
Yeah. Now, obviously, both 007, 008 have inbuilt illuminators, do they?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
both.
And they're not bad IR either.
No, well, I remember you saying sort of with the standard setup, depending on the conditions and whatever, 150 to 200 yards on sort of rabbit and fox-sized targets wasn't out of the question. Does that sound fair to say?
200. Look, for me, 200 would be a stretch. 150 would probably be about maximum for me, but I shoot a bit around stock and stuff as well. I mean, if you're out on a wheat stubble paddock and it was only going to be a fox out there, and you could just sort of see it moving, it's probably a different scenario to being in a paddock that might have sheep in it or calves or something like that, where you want that, you really want that 100% ID. So,
well, moves me on to a question that Robin Coke has just put up here now regarding the PARD 008. When would the rangefinder model come into its own, cal or distance? So I think that really sums it up a little bit. If you didn't put a sort of an external sort of an illuminator, you're sort of talking calibers sort of 150 to 200 yards. So probably, would you, depending on targets, probably 22 Magnum, 17 HMR, even the 22 would be probably ideal, wouldn't they? I suppose.
Yeah, look, I'd run one on the centerfire quite happily. It's I guess where the rangefinder comes into its own is it's really hard to judge distance at night. It's and I don't say that in the sense of I'm the same with you. I've been a spotlighter for years, and it's you've got that coloured image, you've got a depth of field in what you're looking at. Whereas with night vision, you've got to remember you're walking around. It's passive. It's pitch black. You can't I use a red LED headlight, but when you go from a thermal that's one magnification to a scope that's, in my case, night vision at another magnification, it's quite tricky to judge distance. So
it's got to take a bit of getting used to.
Yeah, unless you know the lay of the land where you're shooting, it can be quite tricky. Yeah. So that was I had a 008 without the rangefinder to start with, and I stepped up pretty quickly to the rangefinder model on my 17 HMR, because it's reasonably easy to discern between say 80 and 120 yards at night.
Yeah.
Whereas with the rangefinder, you've got no doubt with that.
And on the rangefinder, what sort of, not that you're going to be shooting to the distance that the rangefinder can do, but have you tested the rangefinder at distance, sort of, to see what it's like?
I think they're rated at 600 or 700 yards. I've certainly run mine, and it's I did some some IR tests with it, and the trees at the bottom of my street are 500 yards, and it was bouncing a distance reading off those.
Okay.
So
And
it's
on the
good.
rangefinder comes up as a yellow square or with a cross in it, separate to the reticle. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, it's off
Okay.
to the side. I think you can move it, but
Yeah, I
it's
think I
high and
looked
to
at
the
that.
right.
Yeah, okay. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay. So, and the difference in price, I think, is about 200 Australian between the non-rangefinder. It might be
It's about. I
different, but yeah,
think it's about three.
is it?
I think it's
Okay.
about 300.
Yeah,
But
okay.
it's look for if I had one on a center, if I had one on a 223 or 204, um, you'd probably get away without the rangefinder, because
Yeah,
if you can see it in night vision, you can just point at it and shoot at it.
yeah, yeah.
But the smaller cartridges, you want a
It's
little bit more finesse with them.
yeah, definitely a 22. If you had it with just a 22, I think your rangefinder would come in very handy, especially if you knew how you had it sighted. You could probably stretch it, especially to rabbits. Nothing to knock over a bunny out past 100 yards with a 22 if you know the trajectory. So, I'm going to have a quick look at some of
Especially
the
if it's dark.
All right, what have we got here? Robert, this we might have answered this, but we'll go over it again. Robert Rudd, what entry-level thermal scope and monocular would you recommend, focusing on pigs?
For pigs, look, I'd probably have a look at the Night Tech range for that stuff. I think they make an MS42. They might even make a smaller model than that. It's certainly
Well, I'll
if you're
just
just
stop.
shooting pigs, you've got a
Sorry,
big thermal source. So
sorry, mate. I think they're reading our minds here. Someone. The next question is, "Hi guys, what's your thoughts on a Night Tech 30?" So they must make a smaller model.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, they do. Yeah.
they're the ones you were
So
talking about.
yeah, they're probably not a bad option just for pigs. I mean, you're probably not going to shoot pigs at 250 yards with the 30mm model, but they'll certainly, it just depends how you want to shoot them. If you're going to walk up to them in a paddock under 100 yards, yeah, it'll work really well, and they're pretty good value too.
Yeah. Next question: are thermals good in heavy bush?
No, that
You
would
can't
be
see
my
you can't see things behind trees and whatever.
no, no. That was probably one of the misconceptions that I had when I got into it, that you could, not that I expected to have X-ray vision, but I did think that I'd be able to penetrate the bush a little bit with it. And look, if you've got a pig or something behind a couple of layers of dogwood, you can see bits of the thermal from the animal. You can surely see that there's something there, but it's not. You can't see the full body outline of an animal behind stuff.
And one thing I remember you talking about, that how this new thermal you've got is so much better in warmer conditions and better than you actually expected.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, better contrast. It's surprising how usable it is after a warm day. I thought when I got it that I'd be, this would be a big investment and it'd be a great thing over winter. But I've used it all over summer, and I've had it out in some pretty bad conditions. I've had nearly 40-degree days, and I've gone out with the thermal, and it works really well. So it's obviously not as good as it is once it cools down, but it's usable.
You said humidity comes into it as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that degrades the image. It doesn't make them unusable, but it certainly has an impact on the image.
Yeah, I've seen some of your footage of some of your video where you've got rats on a garbage pile or whatever. It was pretty cool. How far away roughly was that footage? Oh, you probably put it on the.
Yeah, I think I was about 80 or 100 yards away.
So you could quite clearly.
Like I said in the video, that footage that was one thing that burned in my mind, how much lower the resolution is that you see through the Wi-Fi compared to the screen. Because I remember looking at those rats on that particular evening, and I was really impressed with the thermal. I thought, wow, isn't that, that's pretty cool that I can see. And you could see them jumping around and chasing each other, and it was really clear. But when I got home and looked at the footage, it's, you can see that there's rats jumping around, but it's not as impressive as it was being there.
Yeah. Oh well. What do we got here now? Okay, Baldy McNuts has got a question for you. What's better, thermal or night vision? What's the average distance they work at?
I think it depends on the model for the range of what your range will be on a thermal. There's two different things, so I probably won't answer how far they work. Generally, all the specs are up for what model you want to look at online, and there's two things. There's detection range and there's ID range, and they're both pretty different. So my XI that I've got, I think the detection range on that, I think it's out near like 1,800 metres. On a man-sized object.
That's pretty.
You might
pretty
see
handy.
a heat source at that range, but then I think what you'll find in the specs is that the ID range is sort of half or less than that.
And again, that comes down to the conditions on the night as well, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah. So look, for me, I can I've spotted wild dogs, and not big wild dogs, up on a timbered hillside after I think it was 37 or 38 degrees. The sun had just set. And I could see a dog up on a timbered pile that had the sun on it from about 600 yards.
Yeah.
Now it wasn't a clear image, but I could see that there was an animal up there.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest thing you got to remember, it's passive hunting. You're not, like you said at the start, you're not shining a light. They don't know that you're there.
Yeah. Unless the wind's wrong unless the wind's wrong or something like that, it basically. Look, I think the advantage I see with a thermal monocular for sort of pest, vermin control, whatever, is basically of a night, you can look around and if you think, that doesn't look right, well, then you can move in a bit closer until you can identify it. And then after that, well, then you can go to whatever option you want, whether it's night vision, thermal scope, or go back to a spotlight. It puts you in the game.
With just a spotlight. Yeah,
exactly. So, no, look, obviously, probably fair to say that the more money you spend, the better you're going to get. But you're probably going to have to look at getting to a point and say, well, how good do I need and what do I need it for? And as you and I know, we've talked about this and sort of it's a bit hard because a lot of this gear isn't available in the shops and you just can't take it out and try it. You sort of got to look at the tech specs, and as you've gone into it quite in depth, and it's sort of a little bit like that's one of the reasons we've sort of done tonight, because the questions that I've sort of asked you is what has been asked here.
And I guess the second part of that last question, I'll probably talk about thermal a bit more than night vision. But the night vision range, it's similar to what you get from a I don't know, like a reasonable spotlight or say one of those big O lights on a rifle. If you've got a good illuminator, you might see eye shine at sort of 400 or 500 yards, but you can certainly shoot within 250.
Yeah. Now, just talking about illuminators, obviously you don't have to use the one on it. You can go out, there is aftermarket ones. We won't go into brands and whatever, but there is aftermarket ones that you can virtually clip on the scope or clip on a rail on the say a Picatinny rail as well. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So the night vision stuff that we as consumers in Australia use, it's as good as how strong the power is on that IR light.
Okay, so basically, the stronger the light, the further you're going to see. Pretty simple. Not that different to a spotlight, basically. So
same principle. It's just the night vision scope lets you see that invisible beam.
Okay, Marty Scully's got a good question for you here. Hi Nathan, your thoughts on using thermal gear with your mate on a social aspect? Does it take the enjoyment out of doing it all in the dark? And I'm talking about shooting. Haha. I told you you're going to get some good questions. It's all yours, brother.
I haven't tested the close focus. I'll say that.
Might be a good thing. Might be a really good thing. Wayne Harmon. Is there any problems with recoil on the thermal monoculars with, for example, a 300 Win Mag? Well, the thermal monocular, as far as I see, it's not attached to the scope, but I think he might be talking about a thermal scope. But again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but as far as it's going to come down to how it's mounted and what model it is, I suppose. But
what model, how it's mounted, and the weight of your gun. Obviously, if you've got a lightweight ticker, it's going to be a bit different to a chassis-mounted rifle. So,
Corky's Bees. Hi there. Which one would be best for a 243 for wild dog and deer night and day, as well as long range 300 metre max? And yeah, well, I don't. It's going to be pretty hard to get one that's going to do everything, as far as I see it, especially out to 300 yards, unless you went thermal, more thermal, I suppose.
Yeah, but then you're stretching things with You don't need to shoot that far with thermal. That's the key aspect to it. And even with the night vision, it's the same. You can get in closer than that.
Yeah.
Look, if you've got a good IR, you'll shoot a 300 with a PARD or ATN or any of those night vision scopes.
Yeah. So basically, the way that you sort of work is you thermal monocular, identify or think you get your identification right. If you don't get it right, move in a bit closer. Even if you know what it is, get within range that you think I can use the night vision, and seems to be working pretty well for you, mate. So
yeah, works.
Yeah. So realistically, the pards are either side of $1,000 sort of thing in Australia at the moment. It's got whether they stay at that price, and they're good value from what I've seen.
They are good value, and they're one of the things that sort of I think I found them because of it is the 008 is it's weatherproof. It's got, I think, they're IP67.
Yeah.
And that, for me, that's a big thing because I do a lot of shooting off quad bikes. So there's dust, water, all that stuff. So that's you don't want to go and spend big bickies on a scope and get some rain on it and it breaks.
Now, getting back to let's say the NV008, because it's a standalone unit sort of thing. Obviously, it's going to come down to the quality of your battery, the size of the battery, but what sort of realistic time would you sort of get out of it? I suppose it comes down to also how much you use the illuminator, because you can adjust the level of brightness or intensity. Is that correct?
There's 3 brightness levels on the built-in IR. If you've got that on, say, level 2, and you use that, you're probably looking at I've probably been out for 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, and I don't think I've had a battery go flat. Certainly might have had some red bars on it, but I guess the benefit of the thermal that runs those 18650s is you can buy a quality 18650 Panasonic cell on eBay for about $10.
Yeah, get the Blazer or Blazer is what they've been good in my torches. I'd recommend those.
The other thing that you do with I do it with the thermal and the night vision scopes, is you put them into standby mode when you're not using it. So the PARDs, you just push the power, you obviously hold the button in to turn them on, and it's probably the same with other scopes that do the same thing. You turn it on, and then when you're not shooting through it, you just click the power button and it goes into like standby mode. So you're not powering the screen and the illuminator and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the other thing that I've heard, I don't want to jump around here, but I've heard that the thermals, you've got to be very, very careful with not scratching the objective lens on them. Is that pretty fair to say?
I've heard of people that have scratched it, and apparently it's not great for the image. So
it's all over Red Rover basically.
Yeah.
Look at Robin Coker. Yeah, he's just saying he's had the same discussion regarding thermals and public land. Lethal Lee Baragwanath has asked, which is best in heavy fog? Probably means either night vision or thermal.
Neither are great. I've had the night vision out in fog, and it's the same as a torch. The beam hits the light.
Bit like a rangefinder.
I've had it out in heavy bushfire ash as well, and it was terrible. I didn't have a thermal at the time, but I had a night vision scope, and you wouldn't believe how many particles were in the air from all the bushfire ash. The IR they just glowed in it. But fog, look, you can use thermal in the fog. It does work. It's just not as good. There are some models, I think some of the Night Tech models, or the XI or iRay scopes, they've got an ultra clear mode, and I've never seen in the flesh, but I believe they're really good in poor weather conditions, so high humidity or a bit of fog and stuff like that. I think they perform at that harder conditions a little bit better.
Yeah, okay. No, like I said, there's, mate, a lot of the questions that have been asked is sort of stuff that I've probably already asked you as well. So,
That's all
um,
right.
but it's just good just to hear it again from you because there's so much information with this stuff, and there's so many sort of things you think, oh, you think you've got it covered, then all of a sudden some aspect of it just jumps out and think, oh, I didn't realise I couldn't do that with it, or I didn't realise I could do that with it. So,
Yeah.
Dan Stevens has got a question. What's the best night vision setup for an entry level hunter, mostly rimfire and maybe a 223? Seems like the pard takes some beating. Well, yeah, for money, for value for money, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Neil and Paul, what's the name of their business again? Do you remember off the top?
Spectra Tactical.
Yeah, they're
They're
down in
good guys.
Victoria.
And they use it. They're both shooters, so they use the stuff as well. So
Yeah, so yeah, they can get onto them. They're pretty good guys to deal with. How they're going as far as availability of products at the moment, you'd have to speak to them, but they're definitely worth looking into. And know that they're good blokes to deal with, to be honest with you. And we don't want to sort of just push one product, but the funny thing is, I can guarantee you Nathan could have sort of grabbed anything he wanted to and whatever, and then it's always that big jump. You think, oh, do I want to go and spend that amount of money and then really not know what I'm getting? The sort of the thing with the part is it's, in comparison to normal scopes, it's sort of in the middle of the road as far as price.
yeah.
And you get, from what I'm seeing, it seems to be a trend that a lot of people that are using night vision are using pard. So
Yeah.
value for money, I
And
think, the
I
physical
think, and,
size
and
isn't too
one
big either.
they're quite small. And the other thing with pard, I mean, I haven't used any of it, but I know the guys at Spectra have. They've got a thermal range as well, which is a similar form factor to the NV008. It runs on a 18650 and all that sort of stuff. The only negative that I've got with those, for me personally, is they don't record.
Yeah.
But spec wise, they're certainly really good. So
Yeah, well, I'm yet to see, both of us are yet to see the thermal from Pard, and I'm sure we'll see it in the near future. But Phantom HD's got a question here, but I think it's already been answered. What's the distance you can get out of them? But the Wilder Life is on. Dylan's on, mate. And he's got a really good question for you here. Can a thermal pick up a good cloud when you drop your guts in the paddock? All yours, brother.
Yes, it can.
I want one. Here we go. Wayne Spiteri. Are thermals allowed in all states? Ooh, I don't know that one. I don't know that one at all.
I don't know.
New South Wales,
not
Victoria, definitely, but again,
Yeah, I'm not aware of any restrictions with them. It's obviously there's a few if you want to use them for deer and stuff on public land, but private property, I haven't heard of any restrictions.
no, either right.
I'd check though.
I think safe bet would be to sort of probably in general at least stick to this what we talked about before, spotlighting laws. I think because it's reasonably new, laws will take a while to sort of catch up and probably put them in their own separate categories, I'd say. But at the moment, definitely they come under spotlighting laws, at least in Vic, and sounds like the same in New South Wales. So I'm going to jump through a couple here that are sort of... hold on. Loaded Dog, he said, not in Tassie. We are not even allowed to use bows. I knew that. I didn't know they weren't allowed to use thermals. So there you go. It's interesting. Matt Cato is saying, I have a Pard NV008 LRF on my 243 WSSM. Well, we won't hold it against you, mate, but that's a calibre hardly anyone bloody shoots because it's so hard to get stuff for it. But I'm sure it does well. Sometimes when I shoot, I lose sight of my target due to the muzzle blast and smoke. Do you think a muzzle brake will help with this? No. That would be my answer, because you're still going to get all the smoke and heat and everything out the front. You may stay on your target, but I don't think you're going to see for a fraction of a second. Your thoughts on it, Nathan? I might be wrong.
No, it's the same. And look, we get the same things. So I don't just shoot with night vision. I've still got normal scopes and torches on the side of them now. Same thing with the normal torch. on a rifle, you get that white blast when you fire, and I think it's just because the beam's in line with the barrel. Whereas I guess traditionally you've got a mate that might be 1.5 meters away holding the light away from where that muzzle blast comes out, so you don't normally see it.
Yeah.
But the minute you mount something on your rifle, it's all in the line.
It's the same with spotlighting as well, mate. The amount of you don't see the smoke during the day, but you certainly see the mist and haze of a night. So, Zach Roberts has just said Pulsar are 1,700 now, so they must have dropped a bit in price. The original one, right, I think he's talking about. A few of the boys giving you a thumbs up. You must be answering the questions, mate. You're doing well. I usually stutter at most of these questions. You're doing well. Corky's Bees, can you put links up to these products? After this, mate, just put a question or whatever in the comments regarding which particular ones you're after, and I'll do my best to sort of find out. But most of it's pretty much easy enough to Google most of it. Look out, we're in trouble again. Matty Webb, Wild Harvest is on. How are you, Matty? Can you put... good chat as always, fellas. Been enjoying these live chats. Good on you, mate. I've got to catch up with Matty. He's a top bloke, top hunter. This will be something different for him. He's a trad bow man, traditional archer, normal archer and hunter. But it's always good to learn new techniques. What do we got here? Zach Roberts. Robbo, did you find the name of that Chinese thermal you were telling me about? Well, Nathan knows because he's got one. So far away.
Oh, is that the XI?
Yeah, that's the one, the XI. Which model is yours? You probably said it earlier on.
Mine's the E3 Max.
Which is in middle of the row at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much the middle of the range. Yep.
They're top of their range in comparison to the one you've got. What's different, sort of, in comparison?
I think it was 640 core, not 384. So better resolution, similar magnification. I think they're a bigger front lens. They're a 50mm lens, not 35. But they're also about $1,500 more. So.
Yeah, and realistically, like you said, in the end, it's a spotter. You know, I mean, like, just moving a bit closer, especially all yours is pretty much done on foot, isn't it? Most of your shooting when you're using this.
Yeah.
You might travel around a bit in the
quad. Mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried. I've got a few future plans for that to put it up near the spotlight and stuff, but most of where I find it successful is on foot.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I suppose the stealth mode just in itself, just being quieter. So. All right, Bob by Dynamite 10. Question on the thermal that you use. I saw a US shooter using a tracker type thermal to blood trail. Have you tried this technique? And if so, did it work? By the way, I love the vids, mate. Thanks, mate. Nathan would be the only one that would have ever tried this. So, can you track blood?
I haven't tried it. I haven't tried it, to be honest with you. Look, I guess one point to clarify, I delineate between hunting and shooting, and the thermal night vision gear for me it's for shooting. It's for vermin control or wild dogs or foxes. I don't normally take the thermal if I'm out deer hunting, so that'd probably be the instance where I'd want to use a thermal for a blood trail, and I don't take it out when I do that. So
well, I think as long as it's like anything, it picks up a heat signature. So
you'd want to get it pretty fresh, I think.
Yeah, but if you had a cold night, like ice on the ground sort of thing, and I think you'd pick it up pretty quick. But obviously on a hot night, and if the deer's been gone for 10, 15 minutes or whatever animal, I think you're going to have less chance. So I think it's going to be a difference in comparison for your surrounding heat to how hot the blood still is. So I think it would work. How good it works, I don't know. A few guys jumping on here. One of the guys asked if you're still using the NV007. Obviously, yes, he is. We've sort of talked about that earlier on. He may not have been on here. Sean Kleinitz. So if you're hunting wild dogs in heavier bush, is a night vision more suited?
That's probably a tricky question. I guess you'd have to ask the question, are you spotlighting them in heavy bush? Because that's probably a tricky one to do. I mean, I guess you could stalk them with a night vision scope in the bush, but it'd be pretty tricky. I tend to hunt them on the fringe stuff. Once it gets dark, they tend to move out of that heavy cover, and that's where I pick them up.
Yeah, no, look, I think each situation is going to be different, but look, you're not going to see them with a spotlight either. So you might get the eye reflecting or whatever, but I think the thermal's going to tell no lies either. I think it'll give you enough to get an idea of where it is, so you can move into a better location. But Robin Coke is just mentioning here that lens size changes the base magnification of the unit, which is quite a good point. Phantom HD, was that dog that was eating the other dog in your YouTube, Nathan?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was. Right, what do we got here? Robin again. Robin Coker says, I run an ATN thermal for pest control, including 99% of shots including deer. 99% of shots are under 100 metres because you can stalk up to them on foot under cover of dark using a thermal monocular to find and walk in with. All right, well, I've got a question here. Like, when you're sort of stalking in, obviously the thermal's good when you've stopped and you're looking around, but when you're moving, you're saying you're using the red light on a headlamp.
Yeah.
Are you finding that that's sort of getting the animals sort of saying what's going on here? Or you reckon they don't pick that up at all?
No, look, if you shone a really bright red light, they'd probably be onto it. But I don't. I only use a little.
Yeah, I've seen the little fella use, and it's basically just pointed down at the ground. So as long as you're not looking up with it pointing towards your direction, yeah.
It only goes probably, the one I've got only probably lights up a metre in front of where you're walking, maybe a metre and a half. It's just to see, so you don't, trust me, I didn't have it to start with and I tripped over a few things. So, it's just to see, to see where you walk and so you don't kick, sticks and logs and stuff like that.
Caleb Giovan, g'day mate. Just wondering what your thoughts are on the night sight night vision units. I know nothing of them. You're under pressure here.
I don't. Oh, is that the night sight eagle? Is that the one with the screen? I think that goes on the back of your. I think you put a piece over the back of your scope, and there's a little screen above your scope that you look at.
He might come back and give us a bit of clarification.
But I think they work all right. I think I've got a mate that's got one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fox and Steve, thank you very much for the info, fellas. I'm off. See you next time. See you later. Steve, I hope you're out foxing. Andro, what's the effect does muzzle blast flash have on the pard? I suppose it comes down to calibre, I suppose, as well. But
yeah, it has. Look, I said before, I shoot a 17 HMR. And I get muzzle flash in that, so it's
That's with the night vision.
Yeah, it has an effect. Yep.
Obviously, yeah, because you only shoot with the night vision. You're not shooting with the thermal.
Yeah, it won't. I don't think you see muzzle flash in the thermal, from what I've seen online.
From what I've heard, they don't black out or something for a second. That's what I've heard. They black out, and then come back on. I may be wrong here, but Patricia Haddon. Hi, I'm new, but want to know what you think of pulsar helium. Isn't there a whole lot of different models of those?
There's heaps. So there's scanners and there's rifle scopes. I think they're all pretty solid.
Yeah. Well, Pulsar, obviously, as we've mentioned, are probably, if I was to say, the biggest brand out here for thermal at the moment. I'd say that'd be pretty safe to say that. So.
Yeah. They'd have good support.
All right. A couple of people saying g'day. All right. Here we go. Here's trouble. Dave's on. Hunting a ret.
Ooh.
The coatings for infrared cameras, i.e. thermal, are extremely specific and rare and expensive. This comes from 2 years of professional industrial IR thermography. Good on you, Dave. That's a lot of information there, more than I understand, but good on you. Chris P. I bought mine from Paul, very helpful, and done a great deal with batteries and chargers. No, look, I've only talked with them. Nathan's had a lot of dealings with them, and I think they back their product pretty well. So yeah, get onto them one way or the other if you're interested. We got the Wilder Life. He appreciates it, us taking on his joke. I actually thought it was quite good. I want to know. I'm going to check it if I get one. God help me, there's enough of it going on. Righto, here we go. What's Lee doing? Thanks, Nathan. You're a gem that glows in an area of total darkness. Very much appreciated your time and knowledge. Mike
I'm
Walsh.
sitting in the dark, so
amongst some Aussies. Mike Walsh, geez, a long time since he's been on TV. The ATN Thor thermal scopes seem to be popular in the USA, but in Australia and the UK they are referred to as the ATN Mars. Any idea why they are named differently, as they seem to be the same units? Well, I know nothing. Again, mate, this is on you one.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Would be just a naming convention, I think. I don't think the specs are different.
Yeah. There's a lot of units that we've seen and we see that are coming up look very similar, don't they? The housings look very similar, so it's hard to keep up on all this sort of stuff. So, but either way, you can sort of only. I still think it's reasonably early days with this whole sort of night vision and thermals. In the next 5-10 years, I think it's what we're going to see is going to be pretty impressive. I think if we were to take a snapshot now and a snapshot even 5 and 10 years, it's going to be some pretty high-tech gear, I reckon. So, and most of this comes off the back end of the of the military technology, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, it does. There's been some interesting stuff happen though. So like the FLIR stuff, I don't think they do commercial or private commercial, whatever you call it, thermals anymore. They dropped out of that market.
And they were one of the first, weren't they?
Yeah. They're just doing military and law enforcement stuff now. So
obviously they must have won a big contract, and it's got to take priority, I suppose. Troy Crew just watches both of our channels. Good on you, Troy. Look out, here's another one. There's trouble here. Don McDonald. Really like my thermal. One of the best things is for my kids. Trying to get them out of the Xbox is not always easy, so letting them use the thermal, they enjoy the hunt a lot more. Well, it's fair enough too. Look, like I said, I'm yet to use one in depth. I've had a look through them and whatever, but I think it definitely would put a completely different aspect on a night out, what we used to say is spotlighting. So, Matt Cato, do you ever use the red dot laser on the pard, or do you think it might spook the fox?
No, I've used it. It's quite handy to use it sometimes. So I've used it a couple of different ways. I might have used it to show a mate where I'm going to shoot if he's a bit of a bystander, or sometimes I find at night if I'm walking that the alignment, I use quad sticks to shoot off. The alignment between where I might look with the binocular and where I set the gun up might be a little bit out. So sometimes it's handy to sort of use the laser pointer just to get set up a bit.
So it's only a touch of a button, and it's just exactly that, a laser pointer. What distance would that be good for? Like a normal laser, basically?
Yeah, it's just like a normal go as far as you can see it. Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty handy. I said, for the money, they seem to be a pretty good unit. And look, I don't think you would have bought another one if you weren't happy with the first one, all the second sort of thing. So, what do we got here? Mark Rousseau. Great to hear more about thermal scopes, as it's not something commonly discussed here in South Africa amongst hunters, perhaps in pest control. Yeah, well, so this is the thing, we can only look at what we've got here and what we're allowed to do. And like, I know in the US, for argument's sake, I'm pretty sure they're not allowed to hunt off their quad bikes. And when I don't know if you've been picked up on it, but a few have said to me, what are you doing shooting off your quad bike? Like out spotlighting on private property. They're not allowed to do it over there. And I don't know whether it's all states. So there's different regulations all over the world, and it's hard to keep up with.
Different states in America.
Yeah, it's a little bit like fox shooting too. A lot of people just don't understand why we in Australia have to sort of eliminate foxes, but it's a must do basically. Troy Crew. Nathan, I live on the Central Coast. If you ever need someone to hunt with, hit me up. There you go.
I'll keep you in mind, mate.
Are you a hot blonde? Here we go. Don McDonald. They can be a great learning tool for new hunters. Yeah, well, like I said, I'm probably not the right person to speak on there, but yeah, I could definitely throw a different aspect out to a night out looking for animals. Robin Coker says, yes, 100% you can track fresh blood. So there you go.
That's good feedback.
Yeah. Stevie Roberts. Is it ethically correct, here we go, to be using night vision and thermals? What motivates you guys to pop bunnies at 3 a.m. when you can instead chase bigger game in the morning or afternoon? Well, Stevie, there's shooting, there's hunting, and we all do both. And what Nathan's clearly said at the start, and what we have said, is this is pest control. I personally have got no intention of wanting to use them for deer, but understand too that there is times that farmers are in a situation that deer are classed as pests, and trust me, they want them eliminated. So we have to do our part, and I know Nathan does his. He's out all the time helping the farmers out, and I think there's a place and time for everything. But anyway, what's your side of it, Nathan? How do you see it?
100%. It's look, I wouldn't enjoy shooting deer at night. It's like I said, there's a delineation for me between shooting and hunting, and the vermin control stuff is just purely shooting, and the thermal and night vision, it's efficient for that. So probably a bit of an example that I could give. I've got a little property not too far from home. I've been going there for about probably 8 months before I got a thermal, and I'd shot 2 foxes in probably 6 or 7 trips. And I think in the last 12 months since I got a thermal, I've shot about 27 foxes on that place. And it's only a little block. So the thermal, it's efficient. It's
Mate, when it comes down to pest control and whatever, it's about it being efficient. It's about getting the job done. As long as you're working within the laws, you're there to do the job. And I mean, we can get a little bit carried away with everything else sometimes. So anyway, now hold on. The wilder lifer, Dylan. We've still got Dylan here. I've thought about a thermal for blood trailing. I'm red-green colourblind, and I'm scared I'll lose a bow-shot animal late in the evening. I reckon a dog might be easier. Yeah, look, very true. But having that and a dog would be even better again. But look, it comes down to having a good dog though as well. So let's not forget, not all dogs are good. Some dogs are more of a pain in the backside, and you need to put the time and effort into them at the start. Look, I've been watching Lee with April, and a lot of dogs are easier than others, but dogs take work just to get them under control and to get the best out of them. So yeah, it can be the luck of the draw with a dog, in my experience. But anyway, Bobby by Dynamite, nice, thanks, mate. Hold on, what's this one? Don McDonald, using them, it's more than just hunting. You see so much more. Possums, sugar gliders, koalas. Yeah, look, I think what kids see of a night, I know when we used to take the kids out just with a spotlight, we never used to take guns at the start, just walking around with each of them having a torch, finding animals, mate, to see their eyes light up, literally, the kids' eyes light up when they seen the eyes of an animal. It's pretty priceless, and I'm sure you'll experience that pretty soon too, Nathan, with the kids as yours are getting older. So
yeah, I've had mine out with the torches near home looking for kangaroos and bats and all that sort of stuff. They love it.
No, it's good. Hold on, here we go. Just having a scull or drink it. Ian R. ATN Excite or Pard NV?
For me, the Pard. It's just they're all HD night vision, and it does what the others do. It's cheaper.
What are the Excites worth? Do you know what they're worth, the Excites? Wouldn't have a clue myself.
I think the 4K, don't quote me on this, I think they're up around 1,500.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Baldy McNuts, he's back. Thanks, guys. Really informative. Got to hit the hay. Life of a Garbo. Good on you, mate. Make sure you're up early and getting the job done. I appreciate it. All right, hold on. Aim at small outdoors. Thanks, Robbo and Nathan, for sharing insights. Pleasure, mate.
No problem.
Gee, some of these names challenge me, especially without my glasses on, mate. Ganical. How do these affect your vision when you look away from the scope of monocular? That's a good question. I reckon if there's anything that's going to stuff my artificial lens up,
They do. Yeah.
So is it like looking into a light and then taking it away, and it's like getting a welder flash or something like that? Is it that bad?
It's not it's nowhere near like a welder's flash, but it's certainly you're looking at an illuminated screen.
Yeah. Can you dial it down, the intensity of it?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
But it does have an effect, and that also leads into what I said earlier about that depth perception and judging distance and all that.
Yeah,
you don't have a whole lot of night vision when you're using it, because you look at a bright screen.
And would you say the sort of the night vision compared to thermal, one is worse than the other? In other words, if you took it away, it took you 5 seconds for your eyes to sort of acclimatise again, or both the same?
They both do it. They're both they're both a pretty bright screen that you look at. So,
okay.
It does have an effect. You do get a bit on that. I mean, I'm right eye dominant.
You
do get a bit of a white glow on that eye.
Yeah. Bobby by Dynamite 10. Maybe a military style flash suppressor may help with sight picture disruption. They can direct flash and blast in a direction, not straight up. Possibly, mate. But look, really, I think it comes down to the caliber or cartridge you're using, and I think you just got to accept it that after you're shot, you're possibly not going to see. But sometimes, depending on your animal, you'll actually hear more of the shot after the thump afterwards. So you usually get an idea. That's my experience with it anyway. Vic Wide Pest Control. Pard versus ATN night vision, and why and price. As you know, these will come in very handy for me. Well, I think we just sort of touched on that a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah.
Matt Webb. Great to discover Nathan's channel. Top quality hunting. Well done, fellas. I'm off. He's going Betty boys. See you when I'm talking to you. Right. Good on you, Matt. Dan Stevens. Cheers for coming on, Nathan. Great info. Keep up the great vids, boys. Pleasure, Dan. Talk soon. We've still got a few, I think, coming up here. Well, if you're happy to continue on, Nathan. Oh, shoes, we've got quite a few.
All good.
Troy Crew, mate, if Nathan can get me anything like those antlers on his wall, I will be whatever he wants me to be. Blonde wig's a start, mate.
Brunette, mate.
Brunette, okay. Robin Coker, regarding thick bush. I have detected animals with the thermal monocular, and when you shine a spotlight on them, you can't pick them out. But it's a double-edged sword using a thermal scope. So again, I suppose there's times and situations where it's going to work, and other times where it's not going to.
And it'll depend on how big the animal that you're looking at is as well.
Yeah, exactly. And as we said before, whether it's a cold night and so on, there's a lot of variables.
Probably one thing to lead into off that. One thing to keep in mind as well with the night vision, sometimes you can see an animal with the thermal, and it's hard to find it with the night vision. So the brightness, one thing I've found since I won't say the drought's over, but since we've got a lot more grass, since we've had rain, it's the infrared light in the night vision, it certainly does flare up a little bit on the grass.
Okay. Or the humidity and the moisture, because the ground heat's coming out of a night?
Just that obstruction. So you might just be looking through, seed heads on the grass, like the grass might be too high, and you might be looking at a fox, say 100 yards away, and you can see it in the thermal because the obstruction's really low. But when you try and look through that with the night vision, it sort of flares out a little bit sometimes on that.
Would it vary between sort of like green long grass, like sort of compared to dry grass, or about the same? About the
Doesn't
same.
make any
Okay.
difference. I've had it do it on fences. I've had a not looking square on into a fence. If you're on a bit of an angle down a fence and you're trying to shoot between the posts and the wire,
Yeah.
sometimes the IR might flare up a bit on a fence post that's
Yeah. Yeah.
20 metres in front of you, and you're trying to look at something
Yeah.
80 metres away. So
Would it, like if you adjusted the illuminator down there, I suppose it's a bit of a trade-off. I suppose.
I think it more comes back to the fact that they're a sort of auto brightness camera.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's detecting that brightness that's closer, and it dims the image down further
In
out.
the background,
so,
yeah. Okay.
It's a bit of a niggle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's like anything. You can't expect it to cover everything, but what really does nowadays. No. All right. Sammy James. I run an ATN X-Sight HD night vision scope on my 223. Only downside is the whole thing. Rifle, infrared torch and scope weighs a ton. Yeah, well they're quite long, aren't they? They're those big bloody things, if I remember rightly. They're
maybe, yeah. I think depends on the model. Depends if it's just the original. If it's an original X-Sight, I think they're probably a bit bigger.
Well, a pard certainly. What's a pard weigh? I think the NVAA, it's under 500 grams, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they're a bit more with the mount.
Are they?
Yeah,
okay.
I think a little bit more, but they're certainly not a heavy scope.
Yeah, and one thing to mention too, you need a Picatinny or Weaver rail, or is it just Picatinny? I think it's just Picatinny, isn't it?
I think they're just Picatinny rail for the 008. Yeah.
So that's something to think about too. To be able to get them back far enough, you really need that Picatinny rail to come, depending on rifle, not only to the back of the action, in some cases past the back of the action, from what I've heard as well.
They're quite I mean, compared to what you'd picture with a normal scope, they look a bit unconventional because they do sit quite a way back.
Yeah.
They probably hang back over the back of the action, 3 or 4 inches. It's a fair way.
Yeah, no, true. All right, Phantom HD. Deer is classed as a pest in Hunter Valley. It's good to know. Like I said, mate, I just look after the Victorian law, and they're always changing as well. So it's in everyone's interest. If in doubt, ring up the authorities. That's all I can say, and ask the question or check. Most of these things are covered in a lot of the literature that's put out, but definitely thermal and night vision is, like we've said, quite new to the game. So all the sort of literature has got to catch up. Simon Hewitt. Hi guys, what do you think of the Pulsar Digex N455 night scope? Well, I obviously know nothing about it. You know anything about that one, no?
I've never used one. I think they're all right. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I don't know if they're a HD image. You'd have to probably look at that, whether they've got the resolution. But they might operate on a different wavelength. I don't think there's anything wrong with them.
Well, I think it comes down to purpose as well. Whether you want it just for 100 yards or whether you want it to go 200 or 300 yards, I suppose.
Yeah.
Guido Ramirez. Evening, Robbo. Had a 243 for fallow and foxes, but found it wasn't quite hitting hard enough for the fallow. After some toing and throwing, I bit the bullet and got a 416 Rigby. Drops them good now. Oh, well, you can never be undergunned, but I reckon that might be a little bit of overgunning there. Corky's Bees, ATN, $1,800, Queensland. I'm not sure which ATN he's talking about. He's probably mentioned it earlier, but this is where it's easy to get lost in the whole thing here. Chris P. What is a good entry-level thermal around the $1,000 mark? Is there such a beast?
I'd say no. Look, I've my hunting mate's got one of the original Leopold LTO. I think they're a tracker, and I would compare the image from what I get on a better thermal at 50 yards is probably about the same as what the LTO is at 10. So you might see a cow with $1,000 thermal at 100 meters, but it's certainly something that you want to invest a bit better than $1,000 in, if you want to go down that path.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to people asking the same question about binoculars. What binoculars can I buy for $500? And as much as a lot of people get the shits with my answer, is basically you're basically throwing $500 to the wind unless you're buying a good second-hand pair, because all you're going to do is 12 months down the track is spend what you should have spent the first time, later, you're better off saving your money, in real honesty. Cause,
Yeah, I think you'd be more disappointed with thermal than you would be with the binoculars. It's,
exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely at this stage, because realistically, how long's sort of thermal been sort of to the average bloke? How long's it been available? Probably less than 3 years, probably. That's half decent sort of stuff.
Oh, look, you've probably been able to get decent stuff for
The
5
price.
plus years, but it's slowly become a little bit more. I don't think the prices have dropped hugely, but
no, but probably what you're getting for your money is a bit better. Robin Coker's just saying here to Dylan, the wildlifer. Just remember that at the present time, no thermal or night vision scope or monocular in deer habitat Victoria. Only private land. Good to remember. Rob14539 is saying that the ATN X sight is $1,100. Don McDonald, I use my thermal only on my non-shooting eye. When it's low light, it will muck your eyes for night vision. Well, it's a little bit like the helicopter pilots, isn't it? They only use it on one eye for that exact reason. If they get a flash in front of them or whatever, they'll lose complete vision. So, I suppose it makes sense, I suppose. Robin Coker, Ian R. had an X sight with the external light. They get heavy quick. One reason I went to thermal, but that pard with inbuilt IR is half the weight. Yeah, look, I've got a feeling they're either side of 500 grams. I'll be corrected here, but they're definitely not heavy.
I think the specs are 450, but I'm not sure if that's with the mount. They're only about 6 inches long, 7 inches long. They're pretty small.
Yeah, and obviously the one with the rangefinder is going to be heavier than the one with the non-rangefinder, but they're definitely not. They're definitely not a heavy piece of gear.
No.
All right. Andrei Poporov, good evening. Me want the big stag. What do me need to do to get big stag? Me put on planet for big stag. Well, Andre, just get out there hunting, son. That's all I can say to you. Other than that, you're on your own, brother. Oh, look out. We're both in trouble here. This is from Richard Hatfield, but it's actually his wife, Kylie. Robbo and Nathan, hi. Kylie Hatfield here. Do the moths and bugs still come onto a thermo night scope like my Olight scope mount light? Very good question, Kylie. And Nathan's shaking his head, so it looks like that's a no, so that's a plus. So... Anyway, all right, hold on. Let's go down a bit further. We're still going here. Linda Popovic, do you know anything in regards to the Pulsar Core FXQ50? Well, I certainly don't, but Nathan might. Know anything on that one, mate?
Is that the... I don't. I've got a feeling that's the one that goes on the front of your scope.
Well, she's just put a thing down underneath it. Just put attachment. That's the next sentence.
Yeah. I think that's the one that goes on the front of the scope, and I don't know a lot about them. I have heard of point of impact shifts with them on, not from a mechanical perspective, from an optical perspective, because you're looking through your normal scope, and then the image goes through the thermal. So, I think there's a few other brands that do those, and I think sometimes you've just got to note when it's on what your scope adjustment is for zero. But I'm not that familiar with them.
No, look, like I said, if we don't know, we're going to say it straight up pretty much, as Nathan, he's researched so much, and in the end, a lot of these figures, it's hard to remember what's for what, because I know you're so much better than I am, but mate, I think, was that for that one or was that for this one? And until you actually get them and start using them, it's hard to remember. But Petey Samuels, hi Robbo, I'm looking for a night vision scope that works well during the day. Any recommendations? Well, from what I've seen, the Pard seems to, it's pretty much, it's like almost like digital camera imagery, isn't it, basically?
Yep.
You've been happy with it enough during the day? Is one work better than the other? Like,
look, you're never going to have the same image that you do out of a traditional scope, but saying that, I've used the 007 on my 204 shooting rabbits in the daylight just to record it, and I'm still shooting rabbits with it at 200 yards. So I guess there's the perceived image trying to pick 20 cal holes in a paper target versus the actual use in the bush are two different things. So
yeah, and like we said quite up front. Look, the calibers I'd be probably looking for them would be 22 Magnum, 17 HMR for me. Me personally at this stage, probably not a centerfire. So realistically, for those distances, sort of, you're going to be sub 200. I think that'd be all right, wouldn't it? I couldn't see an issue with that.
Yeah, fine.
Right, who else we got here? Armed Bandicoot. G'day, Robbo, Nathan. Tony here. The barn in Oakley has ATN 4K on special, $13.95 for the 20 power and $12.95 for the other. Good to know, mate. Thank you very much. Andrew Hornet. Hi, just tuned in. I personally have found that when spotlighting for fox, I have better results with standard globe, light force and custom HID version. Any recommendation for a HID range of globe? No, mate, I haven't worried about it, to be honest with you. I've swapped over to LED lights now myself. Personally, I think a lot of people look for better lights. Sometimes you're better off looking for a better scope and going for the weaker end light, so it doesn't sort of flare up and upset the animal as much. So that's just what I found. That's one of the reasons I use an 8x56 Carls for years. So, but you still do a bit of spotlighting as well, do you?
Yeah, I do. Look, probably the only thing. Look, I've got a HID light force. The only thing I did in that is I put a warmer colour tint HID in it. Some of them are, I think they're 6500 candela, so they're almost a blue white light. I don't like that colour tint because the colour's not very natural at night. It sort of washes everything out. If you can get down under 5K or down to 4,500 candela HID, the colours will be a lot better at night. You'll be back to more what you used to with a halogen globe anyway.
Yeah, that more yellowy sort of, or as Lee would say, a lemony. That's what he used to always call my Carls. He said, it's a bit lemony. I said, you're looking through the wrong eyes. Matt Cato, I think we've answered this question, so I can probably answer this one. With the PARD NV007, I'm told you need a parallax adjustment scope. And Nathan's pretty much said yes, pretty much, definite. A couple of the other boys have gone. We're just about to the end of it, mate, by the look of it. Hold on. Last question, I think. Richard Hatfield's got a question. Nathan, over your right shoulder, what is that smaller tusk? Big pig or what?
Yeah, just a pig. Yeah,
just
big
a piggy. Yeah. Oh, hold on, we've got a couple coming up now, maybe a couple. Declan Loxley, g'day, been out glassing a few waterfowl, looking to have a bit of a look with the night vision to see if there's any stags of the mobs at the swamps or just days. It's up to you, mate, but just make sure you're working within the laws of what we've discussed before. So, Game Trail Films, Steve, well done, boys, very informative. Well, I think we've got to thank, there's a few coming up here, but just in case I don't forget, I've got to thank Nathan for coming on tonight, because he's not only answered a lot of questions tonight, he's had to put up with me badgering him about this stuff and asking him questions and whatever. So it's all, this is the advantage of sort of YouTube, Facebook and whatever, as much as there's a few negatives, and we'll just say few. Look, we concentrate on helping each other out, especially at the moment. I think it's been bloody fantastic that someone like Nathan can come on, not only in an audible form, but we can get to see the bloke as well, and I just think so. Thanks, mate. We've got a couple of other questions here, but thanks again. So
thanks for having me on, mate. It's it's good interaction. It's good to answer a few questions.
Yeah, no, I think you've helped out really. Quickly, here's a couple of questions. Wayne Spiteri, does thermals night vision work on insects? If it does, need to eradicate the cricket in my background. Well, I reckon Nathan's had every spray.
It might be my cricket.
All right, mate. Well, I think we're done. Stay on for now until, just don't pull a don't pull a silly face until I can sort of... Hold on. Hold on now. Hold on. We've got a couple of latecomers. Look out. Get into it. Khadijah's come in late. She'll tell us she's working. Khadijah Assad's on here. How are you, Khadijah? She's got no questions. She's just making... Well, she's probably been on all night. She's just now coming to the party here now. But anyway, all right, hold on. Quickly. Gracie Gunfire. One of the things when shooting at night in summer, the thermal was picking up all the rocks that were heated during the day. Have you had that experience?
Yep, certainly.
Yeah.
But I still found that I can disconcern the gap between a rabbit and a rock. Certainly with the XI that I've got.
Yeah. And I think there's a fair bit of like training yourself with it, isn't it? Just getting used to it and different settings and.
I roll through the colour palettes pretty quick. Some are better than others. You might walk through one gully and there's no rocks, and you might use black hot, and then all of a sudden you're using the colour. The rainbow colour, it works better. Just mix it up.
All right, mate. We'll stay on. I'll end this now, and thanks everyone. And I don't know. We'll have to think about what we're going to do for next week, if we can get one up. But I should have rephrased that. If we can get another episode happening for next week, that'll be good. But thanks again, everyone. So I'll see you when we're looking at you.